The San Joaquin Valley in late October carried a particular kind of silence, the silence of land that had been worked to exhaustion, stripped of everything worth taking, left to breathe in the cooling air like an old man after a long day of labor. The almond trees stood in their perfect military rows, their branches bare now, the harvest complete. The dry California soil, cracked and pale beneath the afternoon sun, still held the faint perfume of crushed almonds, a smell that Manuel Reyes had known since he was 6 years old. When his father first brought him to these fields, with a burlap sack and a pair of canvas gloves 2 sizes too large, Manuel was 38 now. His hands were not the hands of a man who sat behind a desk or typed on a keyboard. They were broad, darkened, cross-hashed with small scars from years of branches and wire fencing and the relentless grip of harvest equipment. His knuckles were permanently swollen at the joints, a condition his wife, Rosa, called the farmer's arthritis, though neither of them could afford to have a doctor confirm it. He wore a faded blue work shirt, the kind sold in packs of 3 at the dollar store in Fresno, and a pair of jeans with a tear along the left knee that Rosa had sewn twice and would need to sew again. He stood at the edge of row 47 of the Hargrove Almond Farm, minus 2,400 acres of the most productive almond land in Tulare County, and stared at the ground. Scattered across the cracked soil were the remnants of the harvest. Almonds that had fallen wrong, cracked open on impact, too small to meet market grade, or simply missed by the mechanical shakers and sweepers. In a good year, the Hargrove operation left almost nothing behind. But this season had been different. The drought had stressed the trees unevenly. Some rows produced abundantly, while others yielded thin, irregular nuts that the processing line rejected at a higher rate than usual. The discard pile at the eastern edge of the property, where the reject bins were emptied, held more than 2 tons of unsellable almonds. To Douglas Hargrove, that was garbage. To Manuel Reyes, it was the difference between his children eating through November or going hungry. He crouched down and picked up one of the fallen almonds from the soil, turning it in his fingers. The shell was split, the kernel inside still pale and whole, perfectly edible. He set it back down, stood up, and adjusted his cap against the glare of the sun. Behind him, he heard the crunch of tires on gravel. The white pickup truck that pulled alongside him was clean, in the way that only vehicles belonging to wealthy men stayed clean, detailed regularly, never actually used for the kind of work the truck's design implied. Douglas Hargrove drove with one wrist resting on the wheel, his window down, his expression carrying the particular blend of assessment and mild irritation that Manuel had seen on the faces of landowners his entire life. Douglas was 61 years old, silver-haired, broad through the shoulders in a way that had been muscled in his 40s, and was something softer now. He wore a collared shirt with the top button open, dark slacks, and boots that cost more than Manuel made in 3 weeks. Reyes. Douglas stopped the truck and looked down at him. Season's over. Crew buses left this morning. Yes, sir. Manuel removed his cap. It was a gesture his father had taught him, not submissive, his father had insisted, just respectful. Manuel had never been entirely sure of the distinction. I was hoping to speak with you before I headed back. Douglas turned off the engine but didn't get out of the truck. About your check? Payroll processed yesterday. If there's an issue, you talk to Sandra at the office. No, sir, my pay was correct. Manuel held his cap in both hands, turning it slowly. I wanted to ask you about the discards. A pause. Douglas's expression shifted, not softer exactly, but more attentive. The discards, the rejected almonds, the ones in the east pile, and what's scattered through the rows. Manuel gestured toward the tree line. They can't be sold, I know that, but they're still good to eat. My family. He stopped himself, recalibrated. I was wondering if I might have permission to collect them. Whatever's left, just for my family's use. We wouldn't sell them. Douglas looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that made Manuel feel like a number being calculated, not a man being considered. You've worked my harvest for, what, 11 years? 13, sir. Started in 2011. 13 years. Douglas nodded slowly. And this is the first time you've asked me for something? Yes, sir. Another long pause. A hawk circled lazily over the far end of the property, riding a thermal above the bare trees. Somewhere down the road, a tractor engine rumbled and faded. Come by the house tomorrow morning, Douglas said finally. 8 o'clock. We'll talk about it properly. He started the truck and drove away without waiting for a response. Manuel stood in the empty field for a long time after the truck disappeared. The dust it had kicked up settled slowly back to earth. He turned his cap over in his hands once more, then put it back on his head and began the 2-mile walk to where his car was parked at the edge of the county road. A 2003 Honda Accord with a cracked dashboard and a check engine light that had been on for so long it had become part of the car's personality. He drove home to Visalia along Route 99 through the flat heart of the valley, past the roadside fruit stands now shuttered for the season, past the irrigation channels running low and cloudy with the remnants of a difficult water year. The sky to the west was turning the deep orange and purple of a San Joaquin sunset, the kind of sky that looked painted, theatrical, almost too beautiful for a place where so many people worked so hard for so little. His house was on Oleander Street, a block and a half from the rail yard. It was a small house, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen where the refrigerator seal had been broken for 2 years and made a soft sucking sound every time you opened the door. The yard was neat because Rosa kept it neat. There were 2 rose bushes along the front fence that she had planted when they moved in 12 years ago, and which she treated with the same focused attention she gave everything she decided mattered. Rosa Reyes was 40 years old, 5'3", with dark eyes that missed almost nothing. She had been born in Michoacan and had come to California at 19, and in the 20 years since, she had built a life with the same deliberate care she applied to those rose bushes, patiently, persistently, cutting back what was dead, protecting what was fragile, never expecting the soil to cooperate but tending it anyway. She was at the kitchen table when Manuel came in, helping their daughter Camila with homework. Camila was 10, serious, wore glasses with round frames, and had recently announced that she intended to become a marine biologist, nominally doing homework but actually reading a car magazine he'd folded inside his textbook, a deception that Rosa had certainly detected and chosen not to address yet. How was it? Rosa asked without looking up from Camila's worksheet. Fine. Manuel washed his hands at the sink. I talked to Hargrove. That made her look up. He told her about it while he dried his hands, the scattered almonds, the discard pile, the request, the invitation to the house tomorrow morning. He kept his voice neutral and factual, the way he always did when discussing things that carried more weight than he wanted to show in front of the kids. Rosa listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked at him steadily for a moment. What do you think he'll say? She asked. I don't know. Manuel folded the dish towel and set it on the counter. He didn't say no. He also didn't say yes. No. He sat down at the table across from Diego, who had quietly closed the car magazine inside the textbook. He didn't. Camila looked up from her worksheet. Who's Hargrove? The man who owns the farm where I work, Manuel said. Is he nice? Manuel looked at his daughter, her round glasses, her serious expression, her absolute and complete trust in the reliability of the world, as interpreted by her father. He's a businessman, Manuel said. Go back to your homework. That night, after the kids were in bed, Manuel and Rosa sat on the back porch in the cooling air. The rail yard was quiet. A neighbor's dog barked twice and stopped. The stars over the valley were thick and low, the way they only appeared when the autumn air was dry and clear. If he says no, Rosa said quietly, we'll manage, I know. Mrs. Pacheco said the food bank on Elm Street is open Tuesdays and Thursdays now. I know, Rosa. She reached over and put her hand on his. I'm not saying it like it's a bad thing. I'm saying we have options. I know. He turned his hand over and held hers. I worked that land for 13 years. I know exactly what's in that discard pile. I know it'll rot by December. I'm just asking for what nobody wants. I know you are. It shouldn't be complicated." Rosa was quiet for a moment. Above them, a plane's lights moved slowly across the darkness, blinking red and white. "It's always complicated," she said, "when you have to ask." Manuel didn't answer. He held her hand and watched the plane until its lights disappeared beyond the eastern horizon, and then he looked at the stars for a long time, thinking about what a man's dignity cost, and whether there was ever a price low enough to make it worth selling. Douglas Hargrove's house sat at the northern end of the property, set back from the main ranch road behind a row of old eucalyptus trees whose papery bark shed constantly onto the gravel drive. It was a large house, not ostentatious in the way of new money, but substantial in the way of inherited wealth that had been maintained and gradually expanded over 3 generations. The original structure was a 1940s ranch house, and you could still see it at the core of the building: the low roofline, the wide front porch, the deep-set windows. Around it, additions had accumulated over the decades: a second wing, a covered garage, a guest cottage behind the main house that was larger than Manuel's entire home on Oleander Street. Manuel arrived at 7:58 a.m. and sat in his Accord for 2 minutes before getting out. He had worn his cleanest clothes, dark jeans without tears, a collared flannel shirt, his good boots. Rosa had pressed the shirt that morning without being asked. He had not told her he noticed, but he had. He knocked on the front door at precisely 8 o'clock. The woman who opened it was not Douglas. She was perhaps 55, white-haired, lean, wearing a fleece vest over a turtleneck. She looked at Manuel with an expression that was not unfriendly, but contained a careful neutrality. "Mr. Reyes," she said. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Patricia Hargrove, Douglas's wife." She stepped back. "Please come in." The interior of the house was warm and smelled of coffee and wood smoke. The floors were wide plank oak, worn smooth. The walls held framed photographs, family portraits, aerial shots of the farm at different decades, a few landscape paintings of the valley. A stone fireplace in the living room held the remnants of a morning fire. Patricia led him through to a study at the back of the house, where Douglas was seated behind a large wooden desk, reading something on a tablet. He set it down when Manuel entered and gestured to one of the 2 chairs across from the desk. "Sit down, Reyes. Coffee? No, thank you." Patricia withdrew and closed the door quietly behind her. Douglas leaned back in his chair and looked at Manuel with the same calculating attention as the day before. But here, inside, in the context of the desk and the bookshelves and the framed land deeds on the wall, it carried more weight. "You asked about the discards," Douglas said. "Yes, sir." "Tell me about your situation." Douglas's voice was even, not unkind. "I want to understand what you're actually dealing with." Manuel had prepared for yes or no. He had not prepared for this question, for being asked to explain himself to this man. In this room, in front of these walls that held 3 generations of ownership of land that men like Manuel had worked their entire lives. He felt a tightening in his chest that he recognized as pride fighting with necessity, and he made a deliberate choice. He told the truth. He told Douglas about the season, how the cruise hours had been cut in August when the early harvest projections came in low, how he'd lost nearly 3 weeks of expected income. He told him about the car repair in September, the timing belt that had cost $800 he didn't have, the credit card debt that was now sitting at 24% interest. He told him about Camila's glasses, the new prescription she needed, the $340 that Rosa had been moving around between accounts for 2 months. He told him, quietly and without drama, that between the mortgage, the utilities, the car payment, and groceries, November was going to be genuinely difficult, and that 2 tons of almonds rotting in a discard pile felt, to him, like a specific and addressable piece of that difficulty. Douglas listened without expression. When Manuel finished, there was a silence in the room that lasted long enough to become uncomfortable. Then Douglas opened the top drawer of his desk and removed a single sheet of paper. He set it on the desk and slid it across toward Manuel. "I have a proposal," he said. Manuel reached forward and picked up the paper. It took him 60 seconds to read it. Then he read it again. He set the paper back on the desk very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands are not entirely steady. "This isn't about the almonds," he said. Douglas's expression didn't change. "The almonds are part of it. This is a labor contract for 6 months, November through April." Douglas folded his hands on the desk. "I need a year-round site manager for the East Section. Someone who knows the land, knows the equipment, knows how to manage a small crew during the off-season maintenance period. You've worked my harvest for 13 years. You know this property better than anyone I could hire from outside." Manuel stared at the paper. The numbers on it were real numbers, a monthly salary, not hourly wages. Health insurance, a housing allowance. "And the almonds?" Manuel asked. You can have everything in the discard pile, as part of your start package." Douglas paused. "Consider it a signing bonus." Manuel sat very still. Outside the study window, the eucalyptus trees moved in the morning wind. A tractor started somewhere on the property. The ordinary sounds of the farm, the same sounds Manuel had been hearing for 13 years, now carrying an entirely different weight. "Why?" Manuel asked. "Why what? Why me? Why now? You've had this position available before. I've heard the other workers talk about it. You've never offered it to anyone from the crew." Douglas was quiet for a moment. He looked at the desk, then back at Manuel. "My son was supposed to take over management of the East Section," he said. "He's not going to." Manuel waited. "Personal reasons," Douglas said, in a tone that closed the subject absolutely. "I need someone reliable, someone with a stake in this land." He nodded toward the contract. "That's what I'm offering you." Manuel looked at the paper again. He thought about Rosa pressing his shirt that morning. He thought about Camila's glasses. He thought about Diego's car magazine, and what it meant that his son dreamed about things that cost money. The way all 14-year-old boys did, the way Manuel himself had once done. He thought about the discard pile, 2 tons of almonds rotting in the October sun. He thought about what his father had told him, sitting on the edge of a different field in a different valley, God, a long time ago. When a rich man offers you more than you asked for, the first question is always what he gets in return. "I need to talk to my wife," Manuel said. Douglas nodded. "Of course. I'll give you an answer by Friday. That works." Douglas stood, extending his hand. "I hope it's yes, Reyes." Manuel shook his hand. Douglas's grip was firm and dry and lasted exactly the right number of seconds. Walking back to his car through the eucalyptus shadows, Manuel carried the contract in his hand, the paper slightly warmed from where Douglas had kept it in the desk drawer. He sat in the Accord and read it one more time, slowly, looking for what he might have missed. What he found buried in paragraph 7, in language that was careful and technical and easy to overlook, made him sit back in his seat and stare at the steering wheel for a long time. He drove home. The valley opened around him, flat, vast, beautiful in the thin October light. He thought about what paragraph 7 meant. He thought about Douglas Hargrove's son and the personal reasons, and the sudden vacancy in a position that had apparently been waiting to be filled. He thought about his father's warning, and he thought about 2 tons of almonds, rotting, waiting, belonging to no one, until someone decided they did. Rosa read the contract at the kitchen table, while Manuel stood at the counter and drank coffee he didn't taste. Camila was at school. Diego was at school. The house was quiet, except for the refrigerator's soft, broken seal sigh and the occasional passing of a car on Oleander Street. Rosa read slowly, the way she read everything completely without skimming, moving her finger beneath the lines of the denser paragraphs, the way she'd learned to do with legal documents after the confusion over their mortgage refinancing 3 years ago. She had taught herself to distrust anything that required a signature. She reached paragraph 7. She stopped. She read it again. She looked up at Manuel. "This says you're responsible for any operational losses in the East section," she said. "I know, during the maintenance period. If equipment fails, if there's crop damage, if there's a personnel issue. I know, Rosa. The losses come out of your salary." She set the paper down flat on the table. "Manuel, this means if something goes wrong out there, we could end up owing him money. I read it." "Did you read the part about the housing allowance being conditional on performance metrics?" "Yes. So it's not really a salary. It's a salary with deductions built in. The way it's written, he could reduce your pay every month based on his own assessment of how well the section is performing." Manuel sat down across from her. "I know." "Then why?" She stopped herself, breathed. "Tell me why you're still considering this." He told her the number at the top of the contract, the base monthly figure before any deductions. He watched her expression do the calculation. "That's 3 times what you made this season," she said. "Yes, even with the deductions, even with the worst-case deductions, it's more than double." Rosa looked at the contract again. She touched the edge of the paper, not picking it up, just touching it. "What does your gut tell you about him?" she asked. "I don't know him," Manuel said. "I've worked for him for 13 years and I don't know him. I know what he looks like from 50 feet away. I know he runs a tight operation. I know his managers are afraid of him, and his permanent crew respects him, which usually means he's fair with the people he considers worth being fair with, and the people he doesn't consider worth it." Manuel didn't answer. Rosa leaned back in her chair. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at him. "What's paragraph 7 actually for?" "In plain language, it protects him from liability if he hires someone without full management experience and they make a costly mistake." Manuel paused, "which is exactly what he'd be doing by hiring me." "Or," Rosa said quietly, "it's a mechanism that lets him take back what he gives you." The word "take back" sat between them on the table beside the contract. "I want to talk to someone who knows contract law," Manuel said. "Before Friday. I want someone to look at this." Rosa nodded immediately. "Father Delgado's brother-in-law is a paralegal. He helped the Gutierrez family with their lease issue last year. Can you call him today?" "I'll call this morning." They looked at each other across the table. 12 years of marriage had given them a language that existed mostly in silences and in the particular quality of each other's attention, the way two people who have navigated genuine difficulty together learn to read the things that aren't being said. What Manuel wasn't saying, "I want this. I want it badly enough that I'm afraid of how much I want it." What Rosa wasn't saying, "So do I, and that's exactly what worries me." "Go see the paralegal," she said. "And while you're waiting for the meeting, go talk to the other permanent crew members, the ones who've been there longer than you. Find out what they know about the East section." "What am I looking for?" "Anything that explains why Douglas Hargrove needs to fill this position badly enough to offer it to a seasonal worker." The paralegal's name was Robert Sandoval, Father Delgado's brother-in-law, a compact and precise man of about 50 who worked out of a converted garage in his home in Farmersville. His walls were lined with binders organized by year and case type, and he wore reading glasses on a chain round his neck and spoke with the particular cadence of someone who had learned to be careful with language. He read the contract in 12 minutes flat. "Paragraph 7 is aggressive," he said, setting the papers down and removing his glasses. "It's not illegal, but it's aggressive. In practice, what it means is that your employer has significant discretion to define what constitutes an operational loss." He tapped the relevant section. "This phrase here, assessed against prevailing seasonal benchmarks, that's not a standard term. That's language someone wrote specifically for this contract. It gives the employer flexibility to set the benchmark after the fact." "Can it be negotiated?" Manuel asked. "Anything can be negotiated. The question is whether he'll negotiate." Sandoval looked at him over the top of his glasses chain. "Do you have any reason to believe he'd be open to changes?" "I don't know him well enough to say." "Then here's my practical advice. Go back to him and ask for 2 things. First, a defined performance metric, written, specific, agreed to in advance. not prevailing seasonal benchmarks, numbers. Second, a cap on monthly deductions. You want a floor, a minimum guaranteed payment regardless of performance assessments. He picked up the contract and handed it back. If he agrees to both, the contract becomes reasonable. If he refuses either, you have your answer about his intentions. Manuel folded the contract carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. What do you think his intentions are? Sandoval considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I think Douglas Hargrove is a man who is used to structures that favor him. I don't necessarily think he's malicious, but I think the contract as written gives him options he may or may not use depending on how things develop. He paused. The real question isn't what his intentions are now. It's what they'll be if something goes wrong. The something wrong was already there, waiting. Manuel just didn't know it yet. He found it on Wednesday, 2 days before his deadline, from the last person he expected. Carlos Mendez was 54 years old and had worked the permanent crew at Hargrove Farm for 19 years, longer than anyone else currently employed there. He was from Oaxaca originally, built like a fire plug, with a gray mustache and the weathered patience of a man who had seen most things twice. He and Manuel had worked alongside each other every harvest season for 11 of Manuel's 13 years, and their relationship was the particular friendship of men who spend long days doing hard work together without ever quite finding the time for the conversations that would make them closer. Manuel found him at the equipment shed on the north end of the property, doing winterization work on one of the sweeper units. He asked carefully about the East Section site manager position. Carlos set down his wrench and looked at Manuel for a long moment. "Come outside," he said. They stood in the shadow of the shed, out of the wind, and Carlos lit a cigarette and looked at the tree line before he spoke. "You know why the position is open?" Carlos said. "Hargrove said his son was supposed to take it, Nathan." Carlos nodded. Nathan Hargrove, 34 years old, grew up on this farm, spent 4 years at UC Davis studying agricultural management, came back to take over the East Section 2 years ago. He took a long drag. Left 8 months ago. Hargrove said personal reasons. I'm sure he did. Carlos exhaled slowly. You know what the East Section's production numbers looked like last year? Low, Manuel said. I heard it was the worst performing section, 40% below projection, 2 years running. Carlos looked at him sideways. You know what the section looked like before Nathan took over? Before the drought hit, going back 5-6 years? Consistently the best performing section on the property, best soil, best water access, best yields. Manuel waited. Something changed in the East Section, Carlos said. The workers who were assigned there started having problems, equipment issues, irrigation failures, the kind of things that, he stopped, chose his words. The kind of things that don't happen by accident on a well-maintained farm. Are you saying someone was sabotaging the section? Carlos was quiet for a moment. He finished his cigarette and field-stripped the butt with practiced efficiency. I'm saying Nathan Hargrove spent 2 years trying to figure out what was wrong with the East Section and couldn't. I'm saying he left under circumstances that weren't entirely voluntary. And I'm saying that Douglas Hargrove has been trying to fill that position ever since, with someone who won't ask too many questions. Manuel stood very still. The wind moved through the eucalyptus trees at the far end of the property. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Carlos looked at him directly for the first time in the conversation. Because you have a family, and because you're a good worker. And because I've watched Douglas Hargrove operate for 19 years, and I know the difference between when he's offering something and when he's setting something up. He paused. The almonds were bait, Manuel. He would have offered you something the minute you walked up to that truck. He'd been looking for the right person to approach. The cold that moved through Manuel then had nothing to do with the October air. How do you know that? He asked. Because 2 weeks ago, I overheard him talking on his phone in the equipment yard. He was talking about finding someone with enough need to say yes without looking too carefully. Carlos picked up his wrench. I don't know if it means what I think it means, but I thought you should know it before Friday. He went back inside the shed without another word. Manuel stood in the shadow of the building for a long time, listening to the sound of tools on metal, watching a hawk circle the same thermal above the east section that he'd seen 3 days ago. His father's voice, clear as if the old man were standing beside him. When a rich man offers you more than you asked for, the first question is always what he gets in return. He drove home and told Rosa everything. She listened without interrupting, the way she always did, her hands flat on the kitchen table, her eyes on his face. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So what do we do?" she said. "I don't know yet." Manuel looked at his hands. "But I know I'm not going to say no because I'm afraid. And I'm not going to say yes because I'm desperate." He looked up at her. "I'm going to find out what's actually going on in the east section before Friday." Rosa looked at him with the particular expression she reserved for moments when she recognized the specific kind of stubbornness in her husband that she had loved and been frustrated by in equal measure for 12 years. "Then you have tomorrow," she said. "Don't waste it." Thursday morning, Manuel drove to the east section before sunrise. He had a right to be there, technically. The harvest was over, but cleanup operations continued through the end of the month, and seasonal workers who hadn't yet collected their final equipment. Certifications were permitted on the property during daylight hours. Manuel had left his certification card in the glove compartment deliberately. If anyone asked, he was here for that. No one asked. He parked at the southeast corner and walked the section in the gray pre-dawn light, moving between the tree rows with the systematic attention of a man who had spent 13 years learning to read land. The east section comprised roughly 600 acres, the oldest part of the Hargrove property. The original Grant acreage, with mature trees that in good years produced the largest and most consistent nuts on the farm. The trees looked healthy enough on the surface. Their root systems were established, their canopies symmetrical, their bark without the obvious signs of disease or pest pressure. But as Manuel walked the irrigation lines, the buried drip systems that ran along every row, he started to notice something. The emitters were wrong. Not all of them. Not obviously. But in a pattern that became clearer the farther north he walked, toward the part of the section with the highest historical yields. The section that had underperformed most dramatically in the past 2 seasons. The drip emitters showed signs of having been adjusted. The flow restrictors on roughly a third of the units he checked had been manually tightened down, reducing water delivery to the trees in those rows by what he estimated, based on the restrictor positions, was 40 to 60%. In an almond orchard during a drought year, that kind of water reduction didn't kill trees. It stressed them. It reduced yields. It created exactly the kind of underperformance that would show up in production numbers as a mysterious, inexplicable decline. Manuel crouched beside one of the emitters and looked at it carefully. The restrictor had been adjusted with a specialized tool. There were tiny marks on the brass fitting that came from a specific type of irrigation wrench, not the standard equipment the farm's maintenance crew used. Someone who knew irrigation systems had done this deliberately, carefully, and over a wide enough area of the section to produce significant effects on yield. He stood up. His knees ached. He looked down the long, straight row of trees, the morning light beginning to fill the valley now, golden and horizontal, making the bare branches cast long shadows across the pale soil. Someone had been deliberately suppressing the east section's productivity. The question was who? And the question behind that question was why, and whether Douglas Hargrove knew. Manuel spent the next 3 hours documenting what he found. He used his phone camera, photographing emitters, marking rows on the farm's publicly available aerial map that he'd downloaded the night before, making notes in the voice memo app. He worked methodically, the way his father had taught him to work, thoroughly, without rushing, without letting the weight of what he was finding accelerate him into mistakes. By 9 o'clock, he had documentation of 847 affected emitters across 23 rows in the north-central portion of the east section. It was systematic, it was deliberate, and it had been going on long enough for the trees in those rows to show the subtle, cumulative effects of chronic mild water stress. Slightly smaller canopy spread, slightly reduced nut size in the scattered remnants of the harvest he could still see on the ground. He sat in his car and thought. 3 possibilities arranged themselves in his mind. First, Douglas Hargrove had done this himself or arranged it. For reasons Manuel couldn't yet understand, insurance fraud, perhaps, or some kind of tax arrangement involving underperforming acreage, or a water rights calculation that benefited from declared low yield. Second, Nathan Hargrove had done it, or someone working with Nathan, as a form of sabotage directed at his father, a bitter inheritance dispute, a falling out, some family wound that had been turned outward onto the land. Third, someone else entirely, someone with access to the irrigation systems and a reason to want the east section to fail. Each possibility had implications for what Douglas's contract offer actually meant. If Douglas had arranged it himself, then offering Manuel the site manager position was an attempt to install someone who would either continue not noticing or who, when he eventually discovered it, could be blamed for it. If Nathan had done it, then Douglas genuinely didn't know, and the position was a real attempt to rebuild the section, using someone he'd assessed as capable, loyal, and Manuel returned to Carlos's words with enough need to say yes without looking too carefully. If it was someone else, someone currently on the permanent crew with access and motive, then accepting the position would put Manuel directly in the path of whoever had done this, with no warning and no protection. He drove out of the property without being stopped. He went home and called Robert Sandoval. If I bring documented evidence of systematic tampering with irrigation infrastructure to my employer, Manuel said, and it turns out the employer was involved, what's my position? Sandoval was quiet for 3 seconds. Complicated, he said. Tell me more. The conversation with Sandoval lasted 40 minutes and produced a clear recommendation before Friday's deadline. Manuel needed to make a decision about what he actually wanted, not about the contract, about the situation. Because the contract, Sandoval explained, was secondary. The primary question was whether Manuel wanted to walk away or whether he wanted to understand what was happening in the east section badly enough to take the risk of going in. If you go in with eyes open, Sandoval said, you have options. You document everything from day one. You insist on the contract modifications I told you about. You build a paper trail. And if it ever gets bad, you have protection. He paused. But you have to be clear with yourself about why you're doing it. If it's just for the money, the risk may not be worth it. If it's something else, it's my land, Manuel said. Sandoval was quiet. Manuel stopped. I know it's not my land. Legally, I know that, but I've worked it for 13 years. I know where the soil changes composition in the southeast corner. I know which rows flood first when the irrigation overflows. I know which trees are the oldest and which ones Hargrove's grandfather planted versus the ones his father replanted in the 80s. He paused. I know this land better than Douglas Hargrove does, and someone is hurting it. Another silence on the line. Mr. Reyes, Sandoval said, I'm a paralegal, not a therapist. But I'll tell you this, that's a reason. That's a real reason. A pause. Get your contract modifications. Go in with your eyes open, and be careful. Thursday evening, Manuel called Douglas Hargrove. I want to accept the position, he said, but I need to discuss some modifications to paragraph 7. A pause on the line. Come by tomorrow morning, Douglas said. We'll work it out. There's one other thing. Manuel chose his next words carefully, having rehearsed them 6 times in the car before making the call. I walked the east section this morning. I want to talk to you about the irrigation infrastructure. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. What about it? Douglas's voice had not changed in tone or pace, but something in it had changed in quality, a density, a careful stillness, the way a man's voice changes when he is controlling a reaction. I think it needs attention, Manuel said. Before I start, fine. Another pause. We'll discuss it tomorrow. He hung up. Manuel sat in his car in the driveway for a moment. The porch light was on. Through the front window, he could see the blue flicker of the television. Diego sprawled on the couch, Camila probably already in bed with a book. Rosa would be in the kitchen, or reading, or doing one of the 100 quiet things she did in the evenings that held the household together. He went inside. He did not tell Rosa about the irrigation yet. He told her he had called Douglas. He told her about Friday's meeting. She looked at him for a moment with those eyes that missed nothing. You found something, she said. Yes, and you're going anyway. Yes, she nodded. She turned back to the book she'd been reading. Then be smart about it, she said, and come home. Friday morning was cold, the first real cold of the season. Frost on the windshield of the Accord, and a hard white sky that promised rain before noon. Manuel scraped the windshield with a plastic spatula. The ice scraper had broken in February, and he hadn't replaced it, and drove to the Hargrove property with his documentation on his phone and a printed copy of Sandoval's proposed contract modifications in his jacket pocket. Douglas met him at the door himself this time. Patricia was not visible. The house felt quieter than it had on Tuesday, the warm smell of coffee still present, but the fire not yet lit. The rooms carrying the particular chill of early morning in a large, old house. They sat in the study again. Douglas poured coffee without asking and set a mug in front of Manuel. Manuel laid Sandoval's modifications on the desk. Douglas read them without visible reaction. He picked up a pen, made 2 notations, and slid the papers back. I'll accept the performance floor, he said. 80% of base salary, guaranteed regardless of assessments. The benchmark definition, he tapped his notation, I want to revise to a rolling 3-season. Average for comparable acreage rather than a fixed figure. That actually protects you better in a bad year. Manuel read the notation. It was, as Douglas said, more favorable. He had expected resistance. The speed and generosity of the concession told him something. Douglas wanted him to say yes. Needed him to. The irrigation, Manuel said. Douglas set his pen down. He picked up his coffee mug and held it with both hands, not drinking, looking at the desk. What did you find? He said. Emitter restrictors manually tightened across 23 rows in the north-central section. Systematic pattern, specialized tool, consistent with 2 or more years of deliberate adjustment. Manuel kept his voice neutral and factual. I photographed and documented everything. Douglas was quiet for a moment. He looked at his coffee mug. How long have you known? Manuel asked. Douglas looked up. About a year. The answer hit Manuel like cold water, sharp, clarifying, instantly reorganizing everything. You knew, Manuel said. I suspected. I hired an independent irrigation consultant 8 months ago. His findings were consistent with what you described. Douglas set down his mug. He also told me it had been going on for approximately 22 months. And Nathan left 8 months ago. A pause. Yes, did Nathan do it? Douglas's jaw tightened once and released. No. He looked at the wall, the framed land deeds, the family photographs. My son left because he found out who did, and because of what I told him when he brought it to me. Manuel waited. I told him to leave it alone, Douglas said. The room was very quiet. Outside, the first drops of rain were beginning to hit the study window, soft and irregular, the advance guard of the storm. Who did it? Manuel asked. Douglas turned his gaze from the wall to Manuel. His face held something that Manuel had not seen there before. Not the calculating assessment, not the landowner's composed authority. Something older and more tired. My brother, Douglas said. Gerald Hargrove. He owns 40% of this property under the original family trust. He has been entitled to 40% of the farm's net profits since our father died in 2003. A pause. The east section represents approximately 60% of the farm's total production value. Suppressing its yields reduces the net profit figure used to calculate his distribution. Manuel stared at him. He's been defrauding himself on paper, Douglas said, while taking the actual almonds through a side agreement with one of my processing contractors. The yield numbers show low production. The physical product is being moved through a secondary channel. The difference goes to Gerald, off the books, and you've known for a year. Suspected for longer. Douglas's voice was controlled but carrying strain now. The strain of a man who had been carrying something heavy for too long. Gerald and I have not been close since our father's estate. There have been disputes, legal disputes, resolved, I believed. He stopped. I wanted to believe it wasn't deliberate, that it was a maintenance issue, a systems problem. And when your consultant confirmed it wasn't, I confronted Gerald. He denied it. He has resources, lawyers, accountants. Proving it through formal legal channels would mean opening the entire farm's finances to discovery, which would. He stopped again. It would be destructive to the property, to what I've spent my life building. Manuel sat with this for a moment. The rain was heavier now, running down the study window in small rivers. So instead of going to the authorities, Manuel said, you wanted to hire someone to manage the east section, fix the irrigation, restore production, make the fraud less profitable or impossible without ever formally proving it. Douglas held his gaze. Yes, and you chose me. You knew the land, you needed the work. And Douglas paused. You came to me with your hat in your hand asking for scraps. And you were direct about it. You didn't complain, didn't make accusations, didn't ask for more than what was reasonable. A pause. I've dealt with a lot of people in this business. Men who ask for exactly what they need and nothing more are rarer than you'd think. Manuel looked at the modified contract on the desk. You were using me, he said, even if your reasons weren't malicious. Yes, no hesitation. I was offering you something real in exchange for something I needed. That's not entirely different from how most employment works. He paused, but I understand if you see it differently. Manuel thought about his father's words again. He thought about the east section, the rows he'd walked in the pre-dawn dark, the trees he'd spent 13 years watching grow and be harvested, the soil he knew better than his own backyard. He thought about Gerald Hargrove somewhere out there, with his lawyers and his accountants and his secondary processing channels quietly bleeding the land of what it produced. He thought about 2 tons of almonds rotting in a discard pile, and a man who had driven up in a clean white truck and looked down at a seasonal worker and seen something worth using. I want 3 things, Manuel said. Douglas waited. The contract modifications. Both of them, as agreed. Done. Full disclosure of the Gerald situation in writing to me so that if I'm ever implicated in anything related to the East Section's history, I have documentation of what I knew and when. Douglas was still for a moment. This was the harder ask. It created exposure for him. That's my condition, Manuel said. Non-negotiable. A pause. Douglas nodded once. And I want the almonds. Something shifted in Douglas's expression. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. Something between recognition and respect. You were always going to get the almonds. I want it in writing too. Fine. Manuel picked up the pen from the desk. He initialed Sandoval's modifications. He set the pen back down and looked at Douglas Hargrove across the wide oak desk in the study with the land deeds and the family photographs and the sound of rain on the windows. One more question, Manuel said. Go ahead. Your son, Nathan. He paused. You told him to leave it alone, to protect the farm. Yes. Do you regret that? The silence lasted a long time. The rain intensified outside, drumming harder on the roof now, filling the room with its steady white noise. Every day, Douglas said quietly. Manuel stood. He picked up his copy of the contract and folded it carefully into his jacket pocket. I'll start Monday, he said. The first thing Manuel did when he got home was call his wife. Rosa answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the particular alertness of a woman who has been waiting for news without letting herself wait. "Tell me," she said. He told her all of it. He sat in the Accord in the driveway while the rain hammered on the roof, and he told her about Gerald Hargrove and the irrigation fraud, and Douglas's admission, and the 3 conditions, and the contract modifications. Rosa was quiet for a moment when he finished. "Is he telling the truth?" she said. "About the brother? I don't know. But the irrigation damage is real. I documented it myself, and his explanation for it is the most plausible one I've heard. It could still be a setup. It could." Manuel watched the rain trace lines down the windshield. "But I have it in writing now. The disclosure. If anything goes wrong, I have protection. Paper protection," Rosa said. "Against a man with lawyers and accountants. Better than nothing." Another pause. He could hear her breathing, the specific rhythm of her thinking, which he knew as well as his own. "The almonds," she said finally. 2 tons. He's arranging delivery to the house Monday morning." Silence on the line. "Rosa, I know," she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. "I know. I heard you." A pause. "Come inside. You're sitting in the driveway in the rain." He looked up. Through the front window, she was standing at the glass, phone to her ear, looking at the car. He got out and walked through the rain to the front door. She opened it before he reached it. She didn't say anything. She just stepped back and let him in out of the rain, the way she had been letting him in, from one version of the cold or another for 12 years. The second week of November, 2 things happened. Gerald Hargrove's secondary processing arrangement collapsed. The contractor he'd been using, a mid-size almond processor in Bakersfield named Creston Valley Nut, had been audited by the California Department of Food and Agriculture as part of a routine inspection sweep. The audit flagged irregularities in their intake records. Volumes of almonds recorded as received from independent growers that exceeded what those growers had actually produced, based on their registered acreage and water usage reports. The discrepancy was significant enough to trigger a secondary investigation. Manuel didn't know about this yet. He was in the East Section, supervising a crew of 3 permanent workers as they systematically replaced the tampered irrigation emitters with new units from a supply order Douglas had approved on his first day. The work was methodical and satisfying in the way that all restoration work is satisfying. Each corrected emitter, a small repair of something wrong, a small returning of the land to what it should be. His crew was quiet and professional. 2 of them, Darren Mills and Kevin Okafor, were men in their 40s who had been on the permanent crew for years and who had watched the East Section decline without understanding why. When Manuel explained what he'd found in the irrigation lines carefully, without mentioning Gerald Hargrove by name, framing it as a maintenance failure rather than deliberate sabotage, both men had gone quiet for a moment. Then Darren had said, "So that's what it was," with the tone of a man to whom something had finally been explained. Kevin had said nothing. He'd just picked up a replacement emitter, crouched down beside the nearest drip line, and gotten to work. The third crew member was younger, a 22-year-old named Spencer Daly, just out of an agricultural technology program at Fresno State on a 6-month trial with the farm. Spencer asked questions constantly, which Manuel found more valuable than annoying. Questions meant attention. Questions meant someone who is trying to understand rather than just comply. "How do you know which rows were affected?" Spencer asked on the 3rd day, crouching beside Manuel as he checked an emitter in row 31. "Pattern of the damage," Manuel said. "If it were a maintenance failure, you'd see random distribution, units failing here and there, no consistent geometry. What we found was clustered in the highest yield rows, the ones that historically produce the most." He held up the old restrictor. "Someone chose these rows deliberately." Spencer looked at the restrictor with the focused interest of someone filing information carefully. "Why would anyone do that?" Manuel handed him the new unit. "People do things to land for the same reasons they do things to each other," he said. Money. Anger. The belief that they're owed something they're not getting. He stood up. Your job is to understand the land well enough that you notice when something's wrong. The why is usually someone else's problem. Spencer nodded seriously and wrote something in the small notebook he kept in his breast pocket. Douglas called Manuel on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks into the job. I need to tell you something, Douglas said, about Gerald. Manuel set down the irrigation schedule he'd been revising and walked to the end of the row, out of earshot of the crew. The Creston Valley audit, he said. A pause. You know about it. Word travels in this industry. What does it mean for you? Gerald is under investigation. The CDFA audit triggered a referral to the Agricultural Fraud Unit. Douglas's voice was controlled but carrying the tightness of a man managing significant stress. It's likely to become a civil matter at minimum. Criminal if the DA determines there's sufficient evidence of intent. And your farm. The farm is a cooperating entity in the investigation. I disclosed the irrigation documentation, with your permission since you compiled it, as supporting evidence. A pause. I want you to know that your name is not in any of the documents submitted. Your role was described as a farm employee who identified a maintenance issue during routine site assessment. Manuel processed this. You protected me. I protected us both. Your name in a fraud investigation, even as a witness, could complicate your position here. Another pause. I wanted you to know that I told the investigators about Nathan, about what I asked him to do or not do. Manuel was quiet. It doesn't make it right, Douglas said. I know that. No, Manuel said. It doesn't. But I thought you should know. After he hung up, Manuel stood in the east section for a few minutes, looking at the rows of repaired irrigation lines, the bare trees standing in their patient geometry against the November sky. The valleys stretched away in every direction, flat, vast, layered with 100 shades of brown and gray and the pale gold of dormant grass. He thought about Nathan Hargrove, 34 years old, who had found the truth and been told to bury it, and who had chosen to leave instead. He wondered where Nathan was now. He wondered if the choice to leave had felt like freedom or like defeat. He thought about his own children, Camila with her marine biology dreams, Diego with his car magazine. He thought about what it meant to show them how to stand in relation to things that were wrong. He went back to work. The rains came properly in December, the first real winter rains the valley had seen in 3 years. They came slowly at first, cautious, as if the valley itself had learned not to trust abundance, and then by the second week of December, with the full, steady commitment of a proper wet season, soaking into the cracked soil, filling the irrigation channels, replenishing the aquifer levels that had been declining for half a decade. Manuel watched them come from the east section, standing in the space between row 18 and row 19, feeling the rain on his jacket, watching the water move between the tree roots, and thinking about what the ground would carry into spring. The trees were dormant now, bare and angular in the gray winter light. But he knew what was happening beneath the surface. The repaired irrigation system had been running on the corrected flow rates for 6 weeks. The trees in the previously affected rows, the ones that had been quietly stressed for 2 years, were drinking properly now, their root systems pulling water at the rates their canopies required. In February, when the bloom came, the difference would be visible. By August, when the harvest started, the yield numbers in the north-central rows would reflect, for the first time in 2 years, what those trees were actually capable of producing. He knew this the way he knew most things about the land, not from academic study or technical reports, but from 13 years of watching and listening and being present. His phone rang. Diego. Dad. His son's voice carried the particular controlled excitement of a teenager trying not to sound too excited. Mom said to call you. She said you'd want to know. Know what? The letter came. From the school. Manuel stood very still in the rain. He closed his eyes for a moment. In October, at Rosa's urging, He had written a letter to the Tulare County Agricultural Education Foundation, describing Camila's interest in science and requesting information about their scholarship programs for local students. Rosa had found the foundation through a Google search, following a thread from a school newsletter. The foundation offered partial scholarships for students who demonstrated academic merit and came from agricultural working families. Camila was 10, which was young for scholarship consideration. The foundation's main programs ran from 7th grade. But there was a junior track, Rosa had discovered, that offered academic enrichment funding for elementary students showing exceptional aptitude. "She got it," Manuel said. "She got it." Diego's voice cracked slightly on the second word, and then recovered. "Mom's crying. Camila doesn't understand why Mom's crying. It's kind of funny." Manuel stood in the rain and felt something move through him that was not one thing but many things at once: relief and gratitude, and the particular joy that comes not from getting what you wanted, but from watching someone you love get a door open that had seemed closed. "Tell them I'll be home by 5, he said. "Okay." A pause. "Dad?" "Yeah." "The almonds." Diego's voice had shifted, quieter, more uncertain. "Mrs. Pacheco from down the street. She said her family hasn't had much this winter. Mom gave them some, like a lot. Is that okay?" Manuel thought about 2 tons of almonds delivered on a November Monday morning, stacked in their garage and produce bins, more than his family could eat in a year. He thought about Oleander Street and the rail yard and all the houses on the block where families were doing the same quiet arithmetic his family had been doing in October. "It's more than okay," he said. "It's the right thing." "I thought so." Pause. "I told Mom you'd say that." He hung up and stood in the rain for a moment longer, then began the walk back toward the equipment shed. Christmas came and went quietly. The investigation into Gerald Hargrove's arrangement with Creston Valley Nut became public knowledge in the valley in early January, a brief item in the Fresno Bee, noted and discussed among the farming community, with the specific interest that agricultural fraud always generated, and then absorbed into the ongoing background of valley life without dramatic resolution. Gerald had hired a team of lawyers. The civil proceedings would take years. The criminal referral was still pending. Douglas Hargrove did not discuss it at the farm. He appeared at the East section once a week to review Manuel's progress reports with the focused efficiency of a man who had learned to compartmentalize, and he treated Manuel with the respect that was different from the calculating assessment of their early meetings, less transactional, more direct. The way 2 people treat each other when they have been through something difficult together and survived it. Nathan Hargrove called his father in January. Manuel knew this only because Douglas mentioned it briefly during one of their weekly meetings. One sentence. Almost in passing, the practiced neutrality of a man reporting a fact he was still learning to hold. Nathan called. "He's in Oregon. He might come down in the spring." Manuel said that was good news. Douglas nodded and moved on to the irrigation schedule. The bloom came in February, as it always did, transforming the bare winter trees into something that still stopped. Manuel's breath, no matter how many times he had seen it, the almond blossoms opening in waves across the valley. White and pale pink, hundreds of acres of them, filling the air with a sweetness that cut through the cold morning air and settled somewhere in the chest like a promise. Manuel stood at the north end of row 18 on the first morning of full bloom and looked south, down the long corridor of flowering trees. In the rows that had been affected by the tampered irrigation, the rows he had walked in the pre-dawn dark back in October, crouching over emitters with his phone camera, finding what someone had tried to hide. The bloom was full and even, the blossoms dense on the branches, the trees expressing exactly what they were capable of expressing. Spencer Daly came to stand beside him. The younger man had turned out to be everything his constant questions promised: thorough, attentive, genuinely in love with the work in the way that made Manuel think he would still be doing this in 30 years. "Look at that," Spencer said quietly, looking down the row of blossoms. "Yeah," Manuel said. "You know what the yield projection is for this section this year?" "I have an estimate." Manuel paused. "Back to historical averages. Maybe better if the water holds." Spencer wrote something in his notebook. He'd been writing in it all winter, notes on irrigation flows, soil composition readings, bloom density observations. He was building a picture of the land, the way you only could by being present through its cycles. "Can I ask you something?" Spencer said. "Go ahead. When you first walked this section, back in October, when you found what was wrong with the emitters." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Were you scared?" Manuel considered the question seriously. "Yes," he said, "but not of what I found." He looked down the row of flowering trees. "I was scared that I'd find it and then decide it wasn't my problem." Spencer was quiet for a moment. "But it was your problem. It became my problem the minute I knew about it." Manuel picked up his clipboard. "That's how it works. Knowing something is a kind of responsibility. You can put it down, but you can't pretend you never picked it up." Spencer nodded and wrote that down too. In March, Manuel received a letter from Robert Sandoval. It was brief and professional, a paralegal's letter, precise and careful. It informed Manuel that Sandoval had been reviewing the terms of his modified contract as a courtesy and had identified a clause in the original performance metrics section that, as renegotiated, now entitled Manuel to a productivity bonus in any season where the East section's yield exceeded the 3-season rolling average by more than 15%. Based on current bloom density projections, Sandoval wrote, and the restoration of the irrigation infrastructure to full operational capacity, early estimates suggested the East section's yield for the coming harvest season could exceed the depressed rolling average, artificially lowered by 2 years of sabotaged production by 40 to 60%. Manuel read the letter twice. He set it on the kitchen table. Rosa read it. She set it down. She looked at him. "Did you know about this clause?" She said, "I knew it was in there," Manuel said. "I didn't know what it would mean in practice until now." Sandoval is saying, "I know what he's saying." Rosa sat back in her chair. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then at her husband. Her eyes were bright in the way they got when she was holding something larger than she was immediately prepared to express. "Manuel," she said, "I know. Camila's glasses. I know. Diego's Rosa." He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. "I know." She turned her hand over and gripped his. Tight, the way she held on during the hard things. He squeezed back. Outside, the March wind moved through the rose bushes along the front fence, the ones she had planted 12 years ago, and tended through drought and frost and every difficult season in between. The canes were bare still, but there were small red buds at the branch tips, the first signs of the spring growth that came reliably every year no matter what the winter had been. The harvest began in August, as it always did, with the smell of almonds in the morning air and the sound of the mechanical shakers starting up before dawn. Manuel was in the East section at 5 a.m., watching the first crew position the equipment, feeling the familiar acceleration of harvest pace, the compressed urgency of a season that demanded everything and rewarded attention. But this year was different. This year he watched the harvest from a position he had never occupied before, not as a member of the crew moving through the rows, but as the man responsible for the section, the one who had spent 10 months preparing this land for exactly this moment. He watched the shakers move through the corrected rows, the rows that had been quietly starved for 2 years and quietly restored for 8 months, and he watched the almonds fall. They fell abundantly. They fell the way they fell from healthy trees in a well-watered season, dense and consistent, the ground beneath each tree covered evenly in a golden brown carpet of nuts. The sweepers gathered them efficiently. The bins filled faster than the East section bins had filled in 3 years. By the end of the first day, The field supervisor, a methodical man named Roy Ferris, who had managed Hargrove Harvests for 15 years, came to find Manuel at the north end of the section and stood beside him looking at the day's numbers on his tablet. East section is running 30% ahead of last year on day 1, Roy said. I know, Manuel said. Roy looked at him sideways. You knew this was coming, I hoped. Roy nodded slowly. He was not a demonstrative man. He communicated in brief declarative sentences and the occasional acknowledging nod, which Manuel had come to understand over 10 months as his version of genuine warmth. Good work, Roy said. He went back to his section tally. Manuel stood in the east section as the harvest moved around him, the machines working their rows, the bins filling, the smell of almonds thick in the warm August air, and he thought about October. About a man standing at the edge of row 47 with his hat in his hands, asking for what nobody wanted. He thought about what a man is offered when he comes asking for scraps. Sometimes it is contempt, sometimes it is charity, sometimes rarely, and never simply, it is a door. What mattered was what you did once you understood what kind of door it was, and whether you were willing to walk through it with your eyes open and your father's voice in your head and your family's needs balanced against your own sense of what was right. He had walked through it. The land had answered. On the last day of harvest, Douglas Hargrove drove his white truck to the east section and parked it at the end of row 18. He got out, something he rarely did during harvest operations, and walked to where Manuel was overseeing the final bin collection. He stood beside Manuel and looked at the bare rows, the season's work complete, the trees already beginning the quiet retreat into dormancy that would carry them through winter toward the next bloom. Final numbers, Douglas said. He held up his phone, the yield report for the east section, the full season total. The number was 53% above the 3-season rolling average. Manuel looked at the number. He thought about Sandoval's letter in March. Your bonus will be calculated by end of month, Douglas said. Sandra will have the paperwork. Thank you, Manuel said. Douglas looked at the rows. A long silence settled between them, not uncomfortable. The silence of two men who had been through something complicated together and had arrived, if not at friendship exactly, at something more durable than transactions. Nathan is coming down next week, Douglas said. He'd like to see the section. I'll be here, Manuel said. Douglas nodded. He looked at the bare trees one more time. Then he got back in his truck and drove slowly up the ranch road toward the house, the eucalyptus trees casting long late afternoon shadows across the gravel. Manuel watched him go. Then he looked at the east section, his section, in the way that the land belongs to those who tend it rather than those who own it, in the only sense that ever truly mattered, and he let himself feel, for a moment, without reservation or apology, the full weight of what had been built here. Not wealth, not triumph, something quieter and more lasting. The particular satisfaction of a man who asked for what was reasonable, received more than he expected, understood the cost clearly, and chose to do the work anyway, honestly, carefully, with his eyes open and his hands in the soil he knew. The valley held the last light of the August evening. The almond trees stood in their rows, patient and bare, and already preparing, invisibly, for everything the next season would ask of them. Manuel Reyes picked up his clipboard, made his final notation for the day, and walked toward his car. He drove home on Route 99 through the flat heart of the valley, the same road he had driven every day for 13 years, past the fruit stands now open for the fall season, past the irrigation channels running full and clear in the good water year. The sky to the west was burning orange and purple and deep red, the San Joaquin at its most theatrical, its most generous, its most indifferent to the smallness of any particular human story unfolding beneath it. Manuel drove through it without stopping. He had a family to get home to.